excited, nervous?
Yeah, do you know what? It's podcasts are, because I've been on a couple now. I kind of forget that one, I'm being recorded, and actually this is going to go out at some point, so I just go with it.
Yeah.
And two, I have no recollection at all of any of the podcasts that I've done in terms of the content. And the other thing is that I don't, because I refuse to listen or watch anything that I'm in back.
Right.
So like I just don't do it. I'm just not comfortable with it. So 9 times out of 10, I have no idea what other people are listening to.
To be fair, though, I do that as well. I was saying to myself today, because I record the ones with guests, and they always stick with me a little bit more, but I do the solo ones as well, and I don't edit them. So I chop off the beginning and the end, but everything in the middle is exactly as it's said. So the same with the guest. So I don't go back and watch it, and someone will come up to me and say, "You said this," and it really made me think. Did I say that?
Well, it's Katie Baggett that always sends me like the greatest quotes that I've happened to have, and it's like, yeah, that sounds like something that I would say. Then we'll go with that.
Yeah. We'll get going. Well, welcome to the podcast, Jo.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
It's been a little struggle getting you, because we had to cancel, didn't we, because of COVID situations in the world.
Ongoing saga that is.
The ongoing struggle of life. It made me think, because I was doing my research on you prior to kind of coming on the show and whatnot, that we couldn't have actually filmed this in person anyway. I've recorded on stream like throughout the entire year, but usually before pre-pandemic, I used to have people over to the house and everything like that. And my chair won't. Right? Yeah, well, the steps into my house, like so I couldn't have even got you in anyway.
I mean, to be fair, there's always a way.
Where's a will, there's a way.
I mean, we would have just figured it out, but yeah.
We could have done something, but yeah, it just made me think. I was like, oh yeah, that's the thing. I never realized my house. But then my house is old.
That's the thing, though. Until you're in a situation where you're like, oh yeah, this is a thing. Why would you think of the thing?
Yeah. I completely see that mind. So I'm terrible at introducing people. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Who are you, Jo, and what do you do?
Okay, so this introduction kind of changes every time. I have to read it out, so we'll see what we end up with.
Right.
I'm Jo Tolley. I'm an advocate, facilitator, writer. Pretty much will try everything once, so I'll be anything that you need me to be in any given moment. Lover of tea, good people.
Nice.
All animals. Yeah, I just do my thing and wing it a little bit.
That's a good way to be. That's a solid way to approach life. Lover of things and animals and tea. How much more you need in life, really, is the thing.
Definitely not. Fueled on tea and lack of sleep.
Tea and lack of sleep. So you're kind of a facilitator, but I don't really know what that means.
Neither do I. I guess part of what we do with iJot, which is a organisation thing, business, will turn into something, is ensure that disabled people have the autonomy to embrace their own voice. So I've just started working with the NOAA project in Chicago to create a mentoring program around exactly that, diversity, equity, and making sure that people aren't afraid to use their voice. So I facilitate a lot of stuff. I just do what I need to do to.
You're kind of like consulting, I guess.
Yeah, that is a much better word. We will use that one.
It's one of those like big Scrabble words where there's about 4 things you could say mean exactly the same word
Yeah.
thing, and you're like, yeah, that's what I do. I mean, my role outside of creating is a coordinator, and again, that could mean
Coordinate anything.
Yeah, hundreds of millions of things I could coordinate.
Yeah.
But no, get involved. I also see that you I mean, from my research, because I do research, I do a little bit of background checking.
Dread to think what you have
Make sure I found. The funniest thing I found was when I searched your name, then and did like a kind of like a Google search through. It showed me an article from you on the Lincolnite.
Okay.
But it showed a picture of a young man. As you as like the first thing on Google.
Oh, was it?
It was
Lincolnshire Young Voices.
Yeah, it was to do with the work you'd done with them. Yeah. And I was just like, I'm fairly certain that's not Jo. Unless dramatic things have happened in the last few years. I mean,
who knows? We're living in strange times.
We are living in strange times. But you also obviously I saw the work you did with TEDx as well.
Yeah, so TEDx is single-handedly the most terrifying thing I've ever done, and the one thing that has led me to be where I am, which I still don't quite know where I am, but it's in a direction that I didn't ever think I would be in. Spent quite a few years kind of begrudging the fact that I have a disability, because I mean, you won't be able to see from this angle, but my disability is quite visible in terms of I literally ride on 6 wheels. So you kind of can't ignore that because it's super in your face.
Yeah.
But I just didn't want anything I didn't want to be associated with it or defined by it. And I think being defined by it is still a thing that I have to balance.
Yeah.
But somehow I ended up speaking to Andy Brandon, who then 5 weeks, 6 weeks plus later, I was on TEDx Breakthrough stage.
Yeah.
And yeah,
that's got to be terrifying.
It was. Yeah, I'm not a public speaker at all.
No, much more comfortable.
Not in the slightest.
One-on-one. I can appreciate that. I'm not a public.
No, it's. I think I may have said to him, I really want to do TEDx, but I don't like cameras. Like, please just don't put me on a stage. And he's like, we can't really do TEDx. Well, we'll just have to ride with it and see what happens. You
can just be behind a screen, like Wizard of Oz, just like hologrammed or something. Stand to the side. And,
yeah, exactly that. If I could get away with that for the rest of my life, then we'll go with that.
I mean, that's only been the last few years, though, right? That you've been doing.
That was almost 2 years ago.
Wow. 2 years just disappeared. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, how do you even kind of so you obviously you mentioned to Andy that you wanted to do it. Had this been even in your mind of just maybe I could get involved in public speaking or
So what actually happened was I'd spent 25 years kind of avoiding my disability, doing loads of university stuff, but trying to be really academic in order to get a good job that didn't mean that I had to be disabled within that job. Right. If that makes any sense, then it makes no sense to me now, but I think at the time there was some logic. And I signed up to do a master's at Nottingham Trent University, and got through the first week and was like, nah, I don't want to be in education, but I literally have no idea what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? And it was a friend that said to me, oh, you should start writing. You have a really good way with words. Just start writing about your life and disability. And But that friend was connected in some way to Andy, as most people are. Like, Andy is this guy that just knows everybody.
Friend of a friend.
Yeah, and yeah, so that's how TEDx happened.
It always interests me, kind of the amount of people I have on this show who say they went to uni to do one thing and then completely change their mind. Like, just like,
I think it's like you go to school, you go to sixth form, you go to uni. That is just like, it was sort of 10 plus years ago, that was a given.
Yeah.
And like, my ability to be academic was going to be the one thing that set me apart from my disability, as in, I might be to say, but I'm also super clever and know all of this stuff.
Yeah.
My degree was in theology and ethics.
Okay.
I don't use theology and ethics at all in like my life. It just sounded like a good thing to do. And then and then obviously got to the end of that degree and decided, well, what's that actually given me other than a bit of paper that's, as I could like teach RE or be a nun, you know.
I don't think there's much call for nuns these days. I don't know.
Definitely not. Like, definitely not one. Yeah, so it was like, I need to get back to creativity. Oh, I'll go and do a master's in journalism. But yeah,
theology to journalism. That's,
it's quite a jump, right?
I don't know. It's one of those stranger things. I find it interesting, the people who do go to study things like theology or mythology or anything like that, where it's kind of, the history of it is so long, where you know down the line you'll have to at some point specialize.
Yeah.
And whereas, like, and obviously coming from an art background, I like, art history is really long, and you're like, at some point I'll have to like specialize. And it's a very certain kind of personality, which is just, I'm curious about everything, and I want to know everything.
I think that's the thing, and I think that's why I do what I do now, because my attention span is like the size of a nut. Like, I just don't have one. Whereas I've got so much going on, but it's all really varied. So like, I don't necessarily need to specialize. I just need to make a difference, and that's kind of my one.
Your push.
That's literally it. If I can make a difference, allow people to tell their story, allow them to become the best versions of themselves, both because of and in spite of the disability, then I don't necessarily need to do that in one specific way, because that is so person-centered.
Yeah.
That to do it in one specific way wouldn't work, because you're putting like your own almost like values on other people, and that's not. It just doesn't work.
It's quite an interesting thing of when I think of, so my experience with kind of people with disabilities has been quite a long one, because my mum was an SEN teacher. So we kind of were always involved with activities and classes and seeing what she was doing with the work she was doing. And I always find it interesting of how people who've not got disabilities have been given kind of one cookie cutter structure of how to live life. Like you say, go do this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
Disabilities have been given a different one.
It's really interesting, because like, from someone that doesn't know anything about disability, it is very much still in us and them situations. You're either able-bodied, and I say that loosely because disability isn't just about not being able-bodied. Like, it's not just a physical thing, but it's about being able-bodied or being disabled, right? So, and then within the disability, if you're hey, well, you must be in a wheelchair, you must have a physical disability, because that is the universal symbol
Something
for all
you can see.
disability.
Yeah.
Which, again, not true. And then when you get, okay, well, maybe you are in a chair, maybe you do have cerebral palsy, which is what I have. But then within that, the spectrum is so broad that if you've met one person with a disability, you've met one person with a disability.
Yeah.
And the kind of benchmark for achieving should be no different for able-bodied to disabled. Like, there shouldn't be a benchmark anywhere.
Yeah.
You know? So
it's one of those things. I know the whole idea of kind of benchmarks has come up quite a lot recently, just in terms of like general media and how people, especially obviously exams came out, so all the kids were like looking at their exam results and what pacifying now between versus pre-pandemic and everything like that, and everyone was kind of getting discussion. And someone had suggested that you shouldn't have like exams, you shouldn't have like passing exams, and the amount of uproar I saw it caused kind of online between people of like, well, how do you measure anything, and how do you do these, and look at
do
the
we
world.
need to measure it? Like, we don't need to measure anything, do we? We just need to let people do what they do and kind of guide them. It's not about like, oh, well, I know my times table, so therefore, you know.
I mean, I definitely don't know my times tables.
No.
I
don't count on fingers.
I do. I still do that thing where you kind of, it's that trick with like the number 9 where you hold down certain fingers and it'll tell you which one is. So I can do up to 10, and then I need more hands because I've run out of playing. I vividly remember kind of trying to like, I don't understand people who can memorize long series of numbers.
My brain does not work that way at all.
But like with you kind of being a natural writer, is writing something you've always done? Or is this something which you've had to train for and go, right, I'm going to study this?
That's a really interesting question. See, I wouldn't say that I was a natural writer.
Okay, that's interesting.
Which I think is more my own perception of me than anyone else's. But I think, I mean, my cousin, who is about 10 years older than me, always used to say, oh, you've got a way with words and wonky legs.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, I can easily talk myself into things and easily talk myself out of things. And I just put that on a page. If people like it, then cool. If not, cool. I'm not trained. I have a like foundation certificate in journalism, but that was purely to say that I had some things that I wasn't technically going straight from theology to journalism.
Yeah.
But half of like the pieces that I submitted through that were blogs I'd written. I didn't even. I was just like, oh,
blogs still count. Like, blogs count. They're legitimate as far as I know.
It worked.
It worked.
Just tweak it a little bit.
Yeah.
Fits the criteria.
Do you prefer writing personally rather than writing academically?
Yeah. I think it's really important that people tell their stories, whatever way that may be, you know, because I write, some people do an interpretive dance, you know, like it just, but I think, what does academia really give you other than stats, which is great, you know. If I'm writing about CP, i.e. cerebral palsy, if I was writing academically, it gives me stats and figures, and then people become numbers, and it's all quite removed from reality. Whereas if someone can sit down and go, okay, let me tell you about me, and now I want to find out about you, not only does that allow them to tell their story, but it also starts a conversation which bridges the gap between the us and them situation.
Yeah. It pushes back against that kind of structure which is already there by defining it by a few characteristics and saying,
I don't know if that made any sense.
it made sense. Yeah.
Cool.
Essentially making people less statistics and more personable, so you appreciate them as a human being rather than everything
Exactly
else.
that.
Yeah. We get there in a roundabout way. This is exactly how I talk, so I'm following. Don't worry. We're following. I mean, I find it interesting then that because obviously your main drive is stories and people's stories and lives, and that you study theology, but you say you don't use theology in your day to day. Like, to me, that's all stories.
Well, in fact, you're 100% right, and I haven't ever thought about it like that. But I think I've always just been really intrigued by people and what makes them tick, and kind of why they are where they are, and how they kind of got to that point. That really, really fascinates me. And if I can be a small part in someone's story and getting them from A to B, albeit via like every other letter of the alphabet, then that's good for me.
It almost sounds like you should have done like criminal studies where you just pick people to pieces.
Yeah. Psychoanalyze everything, including myself.
Maybe you should just become like a psychologist. Just like,
I wanted to when I was like between the age of like 6 and 16. I was obsessed with Super Nanny.
Super Nanny?
Yeah, so you know,
Why?
like where the psychologist person goes into families' homes and tells parents why the kids are naughty. I was like, I want to do that, and then I got to doing AS level in psychology at school, realised that it was really, really scientific, and I don't have a scientific brain, so kind of gave up.
That's such a weird show to reference.
Yeah, I was like, that was what I spent my evenings watching as like a 6-year-old, which is even weirder.
I feel like that also really, like, for anyone listening who knows when that show was, it really dates when you were 6-year-old, because I don't think I've seen that show advertised in years as well.
I don't know whether it may not, well, yeah, it was Super Nanny, I'm sure it was. There was another one as well. There was like with that Tanya Byron that does a podcast with Claudia Winkleman. I don't know what it's called, but I've seen it advertised.
It was just that whole rash of kind of reality TV.
Yeah.
Psycho, like, analysis and everything, where they were just like, no, we're going to explain why everyone's broken, and we're going to send people into their homes and tell them why they're terrible parents.
Yeah.
Make good TV,
good
I guess.
Times.
Yeah. Back before the television calmed down a little bit. I mean, it's still terrible now at times, but
it's horrific. It's yeah.
I'm curious now what you watch on a day-to-day basis.
Not Love Island.
Not Love Island. Okay, no, that's good.
I'm good. Anything other than.
I don't have television per se. Like, I don't have like a TV package, so I don't get regular TV. I get whatever I get on demand, and that's pretty much.
That works. Yeah, that's pretty much my vibe too.
Easiest way to kind of avoid them trying to push anything on me in terms of content.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely unavailable.
A bit of Netflix, though.
I mean, definitely a bit of Netflix. You got to have a bit of Netflix. Though at the moment, I'm finding Netflix is doing that thing where it goes round and round in circles. Yeah. And it started recommending to me things which I'm fairly certain I watched on Netflix.
Yeah.
And now I'm lost.
I feel like even they're running out of content at this point.
You think maybe the pandemic had something to do with that? That everyone started watching too much Netflix and they ran out quicker than they thought they would?
And also, they kind of couldn't film, I guess. So they not only were people watching more because it's all they could do, but actually there wasn't content being created because the people that were supposed to be creating content were also sitting watching Netflix.
You do when the bakers just watch baking shows.
Yeah.
You run out of bread. It goes round in circles. I think that's that's an interesting one from the point of view, because you obviously did some interviews with people or chatted to people about creation during lockdown.
So my day job meant that we were doing a comms piece about like the work that I do, and so I sort of pulled a few people together and was like, right, we're gonna write a link in that article, because that's a way of getting our name out into the world, kind of.
Yeah, sadly,
yeah. I think creativity for people in general, but like obviously from my perspective, for disabled people or people with disabilities, depending on which way you want to word it, is really, really key, because it's an extension of them being able to express themselves and again tell their own story, like regardless of what their societal limitations are. So yeah.
Do you think, from your perspective of kind of experience, do you think creativity is something which is kind of offered or pushed towards people with disabilities?
Good question. I think, and I think this is broadly speaking how we still view disabilities. So you've got the disabled person that has got learning difficulties, and people don't think they're going to amount to much, so they go to a day centre and they bake cupcakes,
right?
And that's their kind of. Or you've got a disabled person that is actually, yes, they're physically disabled, but they're really, really academic, and they can, they're really bright, so actually they've overcome their disability that way, and that couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah.
So in terms of creativity, I think there is a lot offered to the baking cupcake ilk.
Yeah.
As a way of expression. And don't get me wrong, like those drama groups and everything are really, really valuable and needed, and I'm a massive advocate of them. But I also think you're either disabled and bright or disabled and not. We've kind of lost the value of representation, and at some point there is something in the middle of those two extremes. Not that they're even extremes, they're just kind of polar opposites. Or that's how society views them. So I think, yes, creativity is offered, but it also needs to needs to be offered to everyone, right?
Yeah.
And if you're disabled, then you're disabled, and if you're not, you're not.
I think
that's fine.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think you end up offered it from a very narrow point of view, like you say. Like it's very much, they look at society and they say, well, you can have creativity, but you can only have certain kinds of creativity, because some of it's just not for you, in a way. Like it's quite and I find that so, like, obviously sad, but strange as well, because creativity is such a broad, like, spectrum of what you could do within it.
It's the stereotype again, isn't it, of, oh, you're a creative, therefore you must be an artist, and you must like paint and like draw and be that kind of creative person. In the same way that disabled people are. You either bake cupcakes in a day centre, or you're good and you don't need any assistance at all. It's like we live in a world of stereotype, which I guess is natural, because like if you were walking into a room and you'd never met me, my immediate sort of response would be, oh, I'm the girl in the chair, because actually you need to know who I am, and that's that's the most obvious way of defining that.
Yeah.
But labels are needed to a point, but they're overused.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is definitely one of those things. There's one of those arguments you hear a lot online, which is people saying, "Well, stereotypes exist for a reason," and it's like, well, yeah, as human beings, we naturally label things so we can identify things and say, you know, this is a door, this is a chair, you know. And when it comes to human beings, like, no, that's the tall person, that's the short person, and we go from that balance. But once you get past that initial impression, it does definitely need to be expanded out.
It's about how we get past that initial expression, though, isn't it? And that's where conversation comes in. That's where we as people need to be open enough to have the conversation so that we sort of knock those stereotypes out ourselves, and not wait for someone else to like worry about what they're saying, whether what they're saying is going to offend people or not. Like we just need to have a conversation.
Yeah.
But that apparently is harder than
I mean, we're English. We don't like talking to people. Like,
no, absolutely not.
Definitely not. The less we can say, the better.
And the less we can, you know, the harder heart we've got, the better, right?
Yeah, right. We keep to ourselves and we carry on, regardless of however the world's burning. Anyone. Not that we want to bring it down a note to the podcast, obviously.
I feel like it's well on its way.
I mean, I guess from that point of view, I'm curious of whether you think things have kind of improved maybe in the last 10 years or whether it's kind of gotten better. Because obviously there's obviously been more discussion about everything, you know, especially when it comes to equity and equality and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think I always say this, I'm super grateful for the time that I live in, where I live in, and super grateful for the advocates that came before me, right? Because that's why I'm able to have this conversation with you. So yes, we've moved away from disabled people who shouldn't be seen or heard, you know. I think every advocate in their quest for equality sort of acts upon equity because they have to want to make it better for themselves as well as everyone else.
Yeah.
And I think that's where equity really sort of serves a purpose and comes into its own. I think we've reached a point now where disabled people have the rights, they have the opportunities, albeit, you know, we've got a long way to go, but we've reached a point where you can't just have the rights because you're entitled to them. You actually have, like, so I have a right to climb a mountain, right? It's not necessarily what I should be doing because I'm not good at climbing. Like, it's just not a thing.
Yeah.
So where then do we start the conversation and start going, okay, you could do all of these things because you now have the right to do them. But what is it that you actually want to do? Like, stop just doing it because society now says that you can, which is a great thing. Don't get me wrong, it's so good that we have that opportunity now. But what is it that you actually want to do? How can equity play a part in that? Because ultimately that's how we get to diversity. It's not if we're all doing the same thing, it's not diverse.
No, I think it's interesting as well that you kind of use the climb a mountain as like the metaphor, because I was thinking prior of just in terms of the media and what gets represented to people on the day to day. Obviously, like Paralympics came to mind. If that's like a major thing of like, this is the thing, and the idea that people with disabilities would be more valuable to society as sports people only.
Yeah, I mean, I think, don't get me wrong, like, even if I wasn't in a chair, I wouldn't be a sportswoman. It's not even a disability related analogy that I just wouldn't. I think, you know, the Paralympics it's all about, they're so inspirational, and don't get me wrong, they really are. They've fought so hard to get to where they want to be.
Mm-hmm.
But as has every athlete.
Yeah.
And I think we need to get away from, oh, you're disabled, therefore you're inspirational. It's like, cool. What have I actually done other than sit in a chair at this point? Like, just tell me what it is that I've done, and not just go, oh, you're able to live your life. Well done. Like, you're so inspirational for getting out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
Yes, and so is every other person that's having to get up and just carry on. Like,
yeah. It's a challenge to get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
Everyone deserves that as like a baseline. That shouldn't be the achievement. That should just be, that's life. We get up.
Yeah.
We get up, we do things. What you do past that is the point of kind of,
Yeah, so I think, Paralympics is great, and they are so that what I'd like to see with the Paralympics actually is them to be integrated into the Olympics. Because why do we have two events? Why do we have the closing ceremony of the Olympics?
Yeah.
And then open the Paralympics? Like, that makes no sense to me.
It makes more sense to kind of pull it all together into one big
because
Olympiad.
Us and them. And like, why? What? That makes,
Sports confuse me anyway. I'm not like you. I am not a sports person, athleticism or anything like that. Kind of the Olympics come by and go every single time. I'm like, oh, we won some medals. Congratulations. Like, it doesn't affect me. I wasn't out there doing things. I had no hand in getting these people to these locations for them to perform. So it can kind of come and go.
Yeah, exactly. I'm 100% with you. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, if it's on, I'll watch it, but it's not like I must,
Yeah. I always get confused by when they're like, especially when you meet people in everyday life who aren't athletes, who are like, oh yeah, like I can go to the gym and I can do this. I'm like, but what use is that in your day-to-day life? Like, you can run really fast and you can lift a lot of weight, but on your day-to-day life of sitting at a desk, do you really need to lift that amount of weight? It seems like a lot of time wasted. I don't know.
A lot of effort when you could be eating a cookie.
Yeah, you could just go have some food. Like, that'd be good. That'd be time well spent. It's balance in life, I don't know.
Yeah, 100%.
I can't tell people what to do with their lives. I mean, I try. I only have a podcast where I sit and tell people what to do with their lives, right?
Absolutely. I feel like we all kind of have that in us as well, to just have an opinion on everything.
Human condition
sometimes
is to offer advice.
Opinion, and sometimes you should just not bother.
I mean, yeah, maybe. I don't know. I think maybe that's the barrier which comes with creativity. Of when you kind of sit and think to yourself of, all right, I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna write something, or I'm gonna encourage someone to do something. And at the end of it, you're like, all right, but am I doing this for me, or am I doing it so they have a feeling of catharsis and can get along with life?
100%. I'm always. Yeah, I feel that a lot. It's like with the line of work that I have fallen into. Am I pursuing this for me? Well, the answer kind of is innately yes, because everything that I do has to start with my own experience of. So, in order to make everyone else's life a little bit easier in whatever way that is, I'm also trying to make my own life a bit easier. But then it's kind of like, am I just being this self-centered person that just wants to like achieve everything, and other people are coming along with me, or am I actually making a difference? And it's a constant kind of conversation in my head to not swing too far that way.
Definitely. I mean, do people question kind of what you're doing at all?
Well, not a lot of people know what I do,
Well, there's
because
that.
not a lot of people, because I don't know what I do, basically. That's ultimately what it comes down to, like that introduction. What is it that you actually do? I don't
Yep.
know. I just wake up and wing it for a day and see what happens.
Proper
Yeah, I
artist way.
think it is really interesting because it's back to that. Oh, I don't want to ask because I don't want to offend.
Mhm.
So part of, when I say I'm a disability advocate to like the average Joe, whoever they are, and they're like, oh, that's really good for you. End of conversation.
Yeah.
Luckily, I've got a really, really good circle of friends that I can kind of go, am I being an idiot? Is this gonna work? And I question all the time.
Yeah.
And kind of allow them to kind of get me out of my own head a little bit, I think.
Yeah. Is that how you ended up on this show?
Yeah, well, it was more, you should speak to Graham, like you should be on his show. It's like, oh, okay, well, we'll do that.
Who's Graham? It's the first question.
It was, I think I was speaking to Liz Thomas,
Right.
and she was like, oh, you should go on Graham Rawlings show. It's like, cool, I'll give him a message, and then I'll just stalk everything that you've done so that I have a vague idea of who you are. That's how it works.
I mean, that's basically all I do, right? my process for finding guests tends to be just like going through different social media platforms, going, that looks interesting. I wonder what else they do.
Yeah, 100%.
Deep diving in, unless someone comes to me and says, "Hey, we should have a conversation."
Yeah.
I think one of those things that like you're saying, though. I think there's an overlap between you saying, obviously, you're a disability advocate, and then trying to explain what that is and why that is, and how that kind of fits into everything else. And I was kind of curious with you mentioning, obviously, the whole idea of creativity. A lot of time, people question why someone would need to be taught to express themselves, because from a societal point of view, if you're not creating profit, then it's not worth anything.
Yeah.
And I think there's a real overlap, especially between kind of people who are disabled or people who have kind of long existing medical conditions or whatever, of just sitting there and going, well, no, we still need to be creative, and there's a value in that which is beyond profit.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are still in a place where you can only be one thing, right? See, if you're disabled, you can only be disabled. You can't be disabled and gay. You can't be disabled and also have mental health issues. You can't be disabled and be creative. Like, you have to be, disability is the defining thing, or not. And that's actually harder if you've got an invisible disability, because then you're having to explain, and I don't know because I have a very visible one.
Yeah.
But friends that have invisible disabilities say to me that actually walking into a room and people thinking you're normal, like, what is normal anyway, and then having to explain that you also have this thing that means that you need reasonable adjustment, additional needs, whatever, is really hard.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot to be said for the sacred and of, like, you can be multiple, like, you can be more than one thing.
Yeah. Do you, from a kind of a personal point of view, do you enjoy confusing rooms of people?
Yes.
There's a certain type of personality. I'm just like, yeah, I feel like Joe's one of these people who just enjoys confusing a room of people. Like, it's fun too.
I think, I don't know. I like to not entertain really, but like confuse people enough so that they don't immediately go, oh, it's Jo and she's in the chair. Like,
right, yeah.
If I can talk my way into a conversation misrepresentation enough to leave people wondering what the hell it is that I've just said. that it sort of breaks the ice a bit.
Yeah, I mean, from chatting to people, it seems like that seems to be the running kind of gag between creatives, of just creatives who and people who are creatively minded tend to go, right, well, you're used to this whole status quo. I think it'd be funny / enjoyable to just disrupt that status quo. Because that seems cathartic to me.
And at least if they don't get anything out of it, you do, because
Exactly.
it's what it is, right? You know where you are.
It's personal progress, not
Yeah.
not everything's for the room, as it were. I mean, in terms of kind of coming up then, and what you got going on, you mentioned working with Chicago and whatnot. What else you got going on?
Yeah,
the rest of the year?
I'm going to give them another plug because they're not
Plug away.
so it's the Noah Project, founded by a woman called Lauren, who pre having her daughter had a very, very stereotypical view on what disability was, and then she had a daughter who had a disability,
right.
And that naturally changed her whole viewpoint. And what they now do is create lesson plans and programs that focus on disability and relationships.
Okay.
Which is just like so needed, because again, with disability, you often find that a relationship is based on something that is like a dependent, like what you need people to do, and not necessarily based on just like an organic friendship.
Yeah.
So we're working with them to create programs that allow people, like I said, to find their own voice and be who they're going to be regardless of their disability. We have potentially got a podcast, maybe radio show that's still kind of in the pipeline, potentially, called Equity, which is basically me just finding out a bit about people, being really nosy, finding out what makes people tick, because that's what I do on a day-to-day basis, so why not record that in some way?
I mean, that's a good setup for a podcast. I feel like that's the kind of thing you should do for a podcast, right?
And allow people, thanks, and allow people to tell their own story, and kind of maybe allow them to tell it in a way that doesn't conform to societal norms.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's one thing, and then we're maybe going into product design as well. More on that later.
There's everything going on, just like
a bit of everything. It keeps me entertained, it keeps me engaged, it keeps me kind of realizing why it is that I do what I do.
Yeah. Do you keep surprising yourself in terms of when you're like, oh, I could be interested in this next?
All the time. And I think it's really hard as an advocate of disability to also have a disability at times, because we all have shit days, and we all are caught by the systems and just the general status quo, as you say, that kind of captures us in one light, and sometimes it's really difficult to break through that and still be able to do my day job, because
yeah.
But yeah, like life's a surprise. Like, just who knows?
Life should be full of surprise.
I like the element of unknown, and the element of I could be doing something entirely different in a year's time. But
I mean, yeah, I feel like right now that's an opinion a lot of people could relate to.
Yeah, 100%.
Unknown. We don't know where we will be in a year's time. Just
yeah. let's just say let's just stay in the moment. I can't believe I'm saying that because I do not stay in the moment at all. Like I have a plan for everything. Like the world is going to end on a daily basis for me in my head.
This will be the one where someone will watch this who knows you and just kind of message you and be like, did you just say tell people to live in the moment?
Yeah. And I can tell you exactly who that person will be as well, but we'll see if it happens. It just, yeah, I'm a bit of a overthinker, drama queen, whatever you want to call it.
I think a lot of, especially kind of like live in the moment is one of those weird little like slogans, which is incredibly easy to say. But I think if you've had a life which hasn't been completely privileged in any way, you automatically start planning for everything.
Yeah.
So when you like live in the moment, it's just like it doesn't feel natural to live in the moment anymore.
No, and also I think for someone with a disability that requires quite a lot of human interaction.
Yeah.
Like I have to plan how I get up, how I go to bed, and everything in between.
Yeah.
So actually, there is no such thing as impromptu. Like it just can't happen. It's that's an interesting one. Yeah, still trying to navigate that.
It's impromptu, just within a very specific framework.
Yes.
Like we're in the box, but anything could happen in the box.
If it hits X criteria.
Yes. We can live with that. I feel there's like there's a management technique which is essentially structured around that idea. So there's a framework called Agile, where essentially you define a framework, and then within that framework anything could happen, but you have to, as long as you keep updates throughout the framework, you're fine because you get to the end of it and then you repeat it.
Yeah, and that is life. That's what I do.
Not a bad way to live.
No, not at all.
Definitely not. Well, it's been lovely to speak to you, Jo.
You too. Thank you so much for letting me come on.
You're welcome. An
hour I kind of invited myself. So
that's the best kind of guest. Someone who's just like hits you up in the DMs and says, "Hey, I'm coming on your podcast."
Yeah.
You don't have much choice in this, Graham. You've been recommended, and I will be coming.
That's the way I work. You should absolutely come on whatever it is that I end up doing equity-wise. So
yeah, I'd be interested to see what's going on the other side of the podcast world. It's quite a strange thing, really. Obviously, I've done 160 something episodes, and I've never been on anyone else's podcast.
Well, you can come like this.
I'm locked in. I've got my own framework going on, as it were, my own challenges. But as I said, it's been lovely. Obviously, people can check out the work which you do. We will give them links.
They can.
To the stuff. You will send us some links at the end of the show, and
will do.
We'll send them all to see you. And obviously, best of luck with the rest of the year and setting things up.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's going to be exciting. I'm excited by what's going on. So.
Good. That's the best way to be. You don't want to be fearing these things.
Oh no, I totally do that as well. I just choose to kind of focus on the fact that it's going to go somewhere.
It's going to go somewhere.
Slightly terrified, always.
It's going to go somewhere. It's going to happen. You can't control that. It's going to be good.
In some kind of way, some kind of direction.
Yeah. But, if we had too much control, the world would just fall to pieces. Yeah.
It really would.
Well, on that note, we will talk to everybody later. Thank you for coming, Jo.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome.